Well, Renee, I am so excited to have you on the Convert with Confidence Summit. Obviously, you're of huge value in this area of what some people may call woo-woo, right? But this is really where the transformation happens, right? So, Renee, once again, I want to thank you for joining us. And can you tell the audience who you are, what you do, and what motivates you to do the work that you do?
Yes, thank you, Lydia, for having me and for gathering all these speakers and allowing us a space to geek out on all things empowerment, which I know we could talk about for a long time. So I am Renee Yobmtob. I'm a mindset coach, and I work with groups and individuals and help them get out of their own way. Uh, this really started for me, like I imagine a lot of people in this space, with personal experience, like really deep transformation within myself using um, a lot of these techniques that I now use with clients. So there were two really big shifts I noticed. The first one, I was battling narcolepsy, which is a diagnosis which there's not like a ton of research on it, or at least at the time, where it's an autoimmune disease, it's a neurological disease, all this stuff that it's like you'll be dealing with it forever. You just need to learn to manage the symptoms. And I was at an all-time low, and I found this training that talked about empowerment and the power of the mind. And on day one of this training, the trainer from stage said 99% of disease is psychosomatic, which blew my mind, brought up all of my baggage, saying like, oh, well, narcolepsy is the 1%. Like my disease is real, right? My reality is real. And obviously, fast forward, that wasn't the case. And even just by breaking up the boundaries of what I thought was real this first day, it went away. And it showed up immediately, the transformation, where the day before, I would need to take multiple naps throughout the day. My nighttime sleep was affected. It was a disease that, if you don't know what narcolepsy is, it's like those fainting goats, that you see on YouTube where they like get
Yeah.
scared and pass out. So that's one of the symptoms of narcolepsy. And that following day, after I just blew up the boundaries of what I thought was real, this like disease that was living in my mind, I didn't really need to nap. I was up from 5 a.m. I could work out. My brain was sharp. And I could stay up till like 10 or 11 p.m. working, doing what I needed. And that's still been going for years now. So that was like that was my first introduction into this like mind body connection and how we can shift our reality, our perspective. That was huge. And then the second one, which compared to that seems small, but is significant. And that was like really finding my purpose. I think like a lot of people, I jumped from job to job and I didn't consciously know what I was looking for. Like I wasn't clear on my values at that time, but I knew there was something missing. So I kept jumping from industry to industry, different types of jobs, like searching for something, and I didn't know what it was. And a lot of these techniques and tools to get really clear on what you're looking for, like what you want, what you're really deeply desiring, it just helped me find it. Like I released all these expectations of what other people thought I should do, what society, all these pressures that we don't even really know are affecting us at an unconscious level. I released those and I got clear on what I wanted. So really finding, to me, it's my purpose, like within my career, to be able to show up in a way that feels so true to me. And then bringing this with clients. So what really motivates me to do this work is the possibilities, like the possibilities for the individuals that I work with, like what's possible for them. And then collectively, what's possible if we're all feeling empowered to step into our true self.
Yeah. Yeah. What a story. I can feel it inside my own heart. I was like, oh my gosh, that's so inspiring. And I can think too, and I'm sure for a lot of this audience who are watching, I'm sure everybody's here has been diagnosed with something. right? Like you can't go through life without a diagnosis, whether it's depression, anxiety disorder, panic disorder, you overreact, you're emotionally sensitive, like whatever. I actually had a client who was seeing a therapist, and the therapist told her she was like too sensitive coming from a therapist. And I was just, I was like, whoa, that's a little scary. And, it's just, I love how you brought up this topic of boundaries and being able to really discern like what is really true for you. And so Renee, I think this concept of boundaries is a little bit abstract for a lot of people. And I know a lot of my clients are showing up with anxiety saying, I got boundaries. Like I do, I am so set with boundaries. And I'm like, do you have anxiety in your relationships? They're like, yes. I'm like, you are not set with boundaries. So Renee, can you talk to us about like the different types of boundaries there are and what could be missing, especially if we're over exhausted in our business, where we feel undervalued, we're not charging our value and things like that.
Yes. Wow. It's such a big buzzword that gets thrown around. Same with a lot of these diagnoses that you just mentioned. I find that people can find it, and I did too, like hearing a diagnosis was really validating at first. It was like, cool, I'm not crazy. There's something that's a little wonky.
Mm-hmm.
And then what I found, because like a lot of people, I have been diagnosed with like PTSD, ADHD is a big fad right now, so I had been diagnosed with a bunch of things that I'm sure a lot of people here have. And at first it can be really helpful. Like, I think it can be helpful to be like, okay, what are some of these behaviors within myself that I'm not even noticing because it's just how I do life and how I have done life. And then I think at least for me and what I've seen with clients, is it reaches a tipping point of this is no longer helping me and it's now a crutch. Like it's now an excuse, a reason for why I can't do X or be X. And so at least with narcolepsy, holy smokes, I was using it as like, oh, I can't go do that because I have narcolepsy, or like, oh, I would do this if I wasn't so tired, And so I think it's for us to discern when is that tipping point of like, great, now I have noticed these behaviors that I can deal with, that I can like learn about myself, versus when is this now hurting me? So it goes from like empowerment to disempowerment.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of the point with boundaries too, because I find with a lot of clients that the boundaries need to come from within, and having it be this big buzzword it has to do right now, at least, with external. People are like, oh, they're crossing my boundaries. It's just such a big word right now. And I love it. And I think there's an opportunity to go even deeper with it, specifically with figuring out what are your boundaries. What are your values? Like, what are the values? What's running your lens, like your view of the world? Getting really clear on that. So then you can get clear on what the boundary is. So I know within a lot of entrepreneurs, consultants, coaches, business owners, it is a lot of the exhaustion. It's like running themselves really hard. It's working really late. It's not feeling like you can like charge what you want to charge or raise your prices once you're already working with clients. And I like to bring them all back to, why do you work for yourself? Why do you run a business? Like, what's important to you about this? And a lot of times you'll hear things like, I want freedom. I want, multiple streams of income. And yes, I of course want to help people, like help empower people as well. And then the next step of that is, okay, where is this not showing up? So if freedom, do you really have freedom if your clients are calling you 24/7? Do you really have the ability to have multiple streams of income, charge what you want? If you have a lot of guilt for charging your clients, which I know a lot of people do, or a lot of shame for even like increasing their prices. So it's what's important to you, and then what's the specific behavior from yourself or others that is a boundary violation. And I think that's a huge piece that's missing for a lot of people, is what specifically is it that you need to address?
Yeah. Yep. I think, if this is resonating with you, I mean, as she was going down, as Renee, you were saying the sort of checklist, like you're overexhausted, you probably feel like you're kind of like a slave to your business, your operations, or your clients. I know that was something I was dealing with in the past. And I know what the huge insight for me was, I was like, if I'm overextending myself like this, if I'm available all the time, I'm really not available. Like I'm tired. I think when I left my job last year, I did a straight 3 months without any days off, well, except weekends. And I was, by that last week, I was like, I am not even really effective. Like I'm in front of you, but when I took that week off, like I was so much more like present and powerful, and I could offer so much back. And for those of you struggling with that guilt, like listen to what Renee just said. Like, what are the consequences of not having boundaries, right?
Yes, you're so right. And a lot of it bleeds in to other areas of life too, because we're human and we're not, we don't compartmentalize. And oftentimes, how we do one thing is how we do all things. So for myself, I've also hit a stage of burnout where I was just like, okay, blinds closed, darkness for a week. I'm going to stare at a wall and decompress, And at that point, it was affecting my, personal relationship. It was affecting my ability to show up as a friend, my connection with my family members, my physical health, so it might just seem like I'm exhausting myself in career, but where else is that trickling down? Because if I can't show up in my like true self, then everything's going to be affected.
Yeah. And I love how this was so like, I just want to highlight what you said about internal versus external boundaries. Cause I think the big thing today is when, yeah, like you said, when people hear boundaries, it's like, oh, we're doing this and people's faces like stop right there, or like, don't come near me. And that's great, right? Like if you feel like you're being if you feel pressure or you feel stress in a situation with somebody, now it's great to start drawing these new lines. But oftentimes it's because, the way we're interacting with others is because we're interacting that way inside of ourselves. Like I noticed with some of my clients, again, being coaches and consultants, if you're being wishy-washy with your clients, or you're being wishy-washy on the phone, and you kind of negotiate with yourself, you're very lax with yourself, then others pick up that from you, and then people don't trust you. They don't feel like you don't get that respect from them. And this is just maybe one of the reasons why one of those prospects just walks away, right?
Totally, 100%. And I think once you are integral to the boundaries you set, it helps empower your clients even more, the businesses you work with, whoever it is, because boundaries are such a big thing that a lot of people need to constantly visit. So if, for example, when I work with clients, it's 1 hour a week and I'm not available during that week for a very intentional purpose. I want to empower them to have the resources to figure out what they need to do live. So I'm not available for that week. Yes, for myself, to give myself kind of a mental break. And also, I think that they should be practicing real time, not calling, needing me. I don't want them to need me. Like I want to empower them to have the tools. So the boundaries, looking at boundaries as a win-win. This relationship, wherever it is, in work and personal life, this relationship means a lot to me. So because of that, here's a win-win. Here's how you win with me. Here's how we win together. So I think even how we view boundaries, yeah, just like you said, it's like a no, like I don't want that. I don't want that. No negativity, which is like another no negative vibes. Yeah, it's like really big buzzwords, which I love the intention. And if we go a little deeper, it's like, what specifically is it that's not aligning with what I want and how I want to be?
Yeah, and I know, especially being a recovering people pleaser in business, and I'm sure a lot of people, as soon as I said that, watching are like, "That's me." Like, if you're a people pleaser, put your hand. Recovering, let's say, recovering people pleaser. That's why you're here, is you're recovering, right? We tend to have these. We want to please everyone, and put ourselves on the back burner. And here's what happens when you do, right? And again, if you're people pleasing inside of your business, you're also doing this in your personal relationships. And of course, you're going to be exhausted. And there's going to be that muddy boundary of like, where do I end and others begin?
Ooh,
Right.
big time. Yeah, it's that analogy that I know has been played a lot and it still remains true. When you're on a plane, they say like put on your mask before you put on anyone else's, because like you're no good to your clients if you're showing up with your like glass half full or half empty, however you look at it. But if it's half there, you're not even really helping your clients. You're not helping humanity. All these values that you want, you're unable to fulfill.
Yeah. And Renee, I'm thinking, in your opinion, is this why some people maybe show up and they feel like they have like imposter syndrome? Like they feel like they're frauds, like they might be found out one day and all of a sudden like their clients might up and walk away, or they fear that rejection, like they might be found out. So they don't increase their prices, or they don't maybe get on the call at all, right? They avoid this.
Yeah, imposter syndrome is so big, I think, in the entrepreneurial space. When you own a business, run a business, again, the coaches, the consultants, a lot of it is the who am I to be doing this in the first place? And then who am I to charge this? And I think that belief, we call it a limiting belief because that's not true, but that it's like, at an unconscious level, because if I have somebody come to me and say, I don't think I'm enough. If I say you're enough, don't worry about it. It doesn't really feel better because it's a really deep-seated unconscious belief, oftentimes that people have, whether it's worthiness, whether it's like not being enough, whether it's like a really deep fear of failing. All of these I've dealt with, by the way, and I think come up for a lot of people. They're underlying, and what that does is it causes a bunch of like surface problems, which also seem real and big. So it's those thoughts. It's the who am I to do this? It's the fear of jumping on a sales call, a fear of putting yourself out there on social media, the fear of rejection, like you mentioned, which is a big one, and your inability to recognize your worthiness and charging what you want to charge and setting the boundaries around how people can work with you.
Yeah. So like what could be maybe the first step to, is it a matter of like retraining our minds, or sort of disassembling this belief? Like, so let's just imagine like this audience is like, yep, if you're like, I am that person, I have imposter syndrome, like I feel like I am a fraud. And before I get your feedback, Renee, one thing I have noticed is that often people's opinions of themselves are pretty accurate. And I'm not saying that to shame anyone or guilt anyone at all. That is not the purpose of that statement. But it's oftentimes if we feel like we're showing up as a fraud, we kind of are in a way, right? Like maybe we're not following through on our own promises to ourselves. So right, this just again, feelings just serve as a sign or a signal that something's just out of alignment, like your body's not agreeing with you in some way, right? So what's like maybe the first step or a couple steps we can take to kind of start to get out of this feeling like a fraud syndrome?
Yeah, I think you just nailed it. I think it's the awareness that something is off. So it's the ability to notice this sensation, this feeling, even if some people can't name it. It's such an unconscious belief, but if you show up every day and you're like, ooh, if you bring a certain level of uncertainty to your clients, if you're noticing that your business like started like this and is like kind of going down and down and down and down, there are all these little indicators. And if you just kind of notice that you're like, ooh, something's off, like something isn't aligned, something doesn't feel right, I think that's really the first step. And like you said, it's emotions are just meant to be noticed and felt. And it's just an indicator that there's something else there. Uh, and I think it's big for us in the coaching and consulting space to listen to our own advice as well. Uh, and maybe you feel this way too, Lydia. I do this work all the time, every day, and I still make sure that I have mentors, that I hire coaches, because we all do have blind spots. I know what I know consciously, and I can do my work unconsciously. And still, I find it so important to practice what I preach, which is um, sometimes we have blind spots. So hire somebody yourself to help you see what's not working, which I think is where a lot of people in our industry, they don't do. How can I ask somebody to go deep, right, in their work, recognize all these unconscious patterns, that tell them that, like, need a different perspective. I'm not also doing that for myself, seeing what am I missing, where can I improve, whether that's through right now I'm doing a yoga teacher training. So I'm like, something wasn't really right. I didn't know what it was. I reached out to this yoga teacher, and that's kind of like bringing a whole new awareness. Before I got into this, it was like, something's not right. Something's misaligned. So I got into this. I've worked with coaches. I have mentors. So it's really practicing what we preach. And I think that helps with the not feeling like a fraud, because you're not.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think as coaches and consultants or just service-based providers, often we get caught up in the strategy. And I think, well, I know I first got confused because the coach I brought on, who's been great with strategy and also helpful with mindset, I still noticed there were things like, I have the strategy, but I'm hesitating to do it. There's resistance to following up with that prospect who didn't show up to that call, or there's resistance. And yeah, like you said, putting yourself out there. And it's just as important, if not more, than the strategy. Because what good is a strategy if you're not going to do it, or you're going to half do it? You're gonna have like one foot in, one foot out, because in the end, like, people see you and they feel you. And especially if you're a coach or a consultant, like, you're interacting with prospects probably, or you're interacting with a team, and people can pick up in a vibe, I guess is a more colloquial way to say it, is your vibe. So your vibe, I mean, at least for me personally, is probably the most important thing to focus on, whether it's interacting with, like, you, Renee, when we talk on the phone at the first, all the way up until like presenting on a stage or in a Zoom meeting. Your vibe is what is going to attract or, push away those people who are not for you.
Yes. Because I'm sure we've all watched or seen or felt a speaker or somebody that was uncertain, and even watching it. I love comedy shows, and every time somebody comes up on stage and is like not confident, like, you look around the room and everybody's like, we can feel it, and we're so rooting for them. It's like, you got it, but it's like, you just want them so bad to like step into their power themselves, because you can feel it, your audience can feel it, your clients can feel it. So that's why it's so important to start with, like, just eliminating those beliefs, eliminating that guilt, that shame, that fear, eliminating it from the unconscious, so that you can not only get clear on where you want to go, what you want to do, but also have that confidence, that vibe, that energy behind it to like take empowering action. Just like you said, there's, for the entrepreneurs and the business owners, there's a million ways to do things and market, and everyone's saying, do this, it's the best, do this, this is the best. And oftentimes people who are in this space are like, do whatever feels right, because that's what you'll do consistently. That's how you'll show up, and your audience will be able to feel it from you. So it's almost like it doesn't really matter what you do. It matters how you do it, how you're showing up and being.
Yeah, I remember. And as we just wrap up here, I'm sure a lot of viewers and maybe even you, Renee, can relate. I can't think of how many programs I've done, try this strategy, sign up for that program, and they all fell through for a while. And I used to point outside myself like, oh, that it was that coach or the program wasn't good enough or they weren't available or blah, blah, blah. And after, finally realizing, I was like, oh my gosh, like, how many more programs am I going to do? Till I start to take responsibility. And that's when things shifted. It was like time began to really matter. And just saying that, because like maybe you're trying all these programs and you're trying all these strategies, these Facebook ads and YouTube, and let me do a course, but how you do it is way more important than the what.
Yes, I am so with you, Lydia. I did that too. I was like the finger pointing, and then I was like, oh, like, okay, it's time to go in here. Yeah.
And speaking of boundaries, as we wrap up here, Renee, this has been just an absolute fun conversation with you. I know you have a free gift for this audience, and it's a way for them to participate just for their attendance for showing up here. And it's called Building Better Boundaries. Renee, can you tell us more about that and what they are able to get as a result of attending the summit?
Yes, absolutely. So like we mentioned, the first step is knowing something's off. So I just really want to celebrate the people here who attended the summit because they felt something was off and they took action, which is huge. And that's like a huge step in the right direction to have that change that they're looking for. So I wanted to celebrate that with this offer, which I'm only doing for the summit attendees for taking action and celebrating, because that's huge. And what it is it's a 3-day program starting on April 1st, where we're going to get really clear on your boundaries as it relates to your work and career. So we're going to get clear on what are your values, what's the purpose that you even went into this industry yourself, getting really clear on that. We're going to do some release work to get rid of some of that underlying gunk that we talked about earlier. We're going to get really clear on what your boundaries are and how to articulate them, whether it's to colleagues, whether it's to a boss, an employee, or your clients. We're going to get really clear on how to do that, how to have that conversation, and more importantly, how to feel good doing all of this, coming from a place of strength, coming from a place of your power, while setting boundaries so that you can show up how you really want to show up and impact the world in the way that you're wanting to do. So they'll walk away with like clear boundaries, clear action steps, and a really empowering state to do that in.
Yeah, this is critical. Like even if you've been in business for a while, if you've plateaued and you're wondering like, how can I free up more time, or how can I free up more money, or, maybe what do I have to leverage? This is all about setting boundaries. And again, it can be emotional boundaries, physical boundaries, energetic boundaries. But this is oftentimes a shift that needs to happen when you're ready to take your business to the next level, or even if you're just getting into business. If you're bringing over those old habits from your personal life, this has to shift. And for those of you who are wondering how do I set a boundary? Like, what does that even sound like? I don't know how, I've never been taught that. Maybe you were raised without boundaries. I know I was raised to not be able to say no in my family. And this, of course, proved a huge issue in my business as, overextending myself. So I know, Renee, you have a special code. What is the code for them to go grab this? And for those of you, when she says the code, click the link below to go sign up today. This offer is only available for 24 hours from the moment you watch this. So the moment this email is sent out. So Renee, can you fill them in on what the code is to join?
Yeah, the code is Confidence 2022.
Awesome. Thank you, Renee, so much for being here. Go click the link below this video to sign up for that workshop. If you do nothing else, go attend this workshop. I can't, if you feel like you're like, well, I don't want to hire a coach yet, or you kind of want to still do this on your own, this is a great place to kind of just get your feet wet, get to know Renee, get to know more about boundaries is absolutely essential for your business success. So Renee, thank you so much for being a part of the summit, for being a speaker here with us. And what an amazing conversation here today.
Yes, I can't wait for more offline with you. Thank you for having me. And thank you to everyone who attended. You're on the right track.
Awesome. Go get it, guys.